Do you think what Israel is doing right now is justifiable? Do you agree with a thief breaking into a bank and taking people hostage? And then the country comes and bombs the whole bank and kills the thieves and 80 civilians.
Do you think I can make the analogy a little more accurate? Let's say the thief comes, rapes your family, and kidnaps members of your family like that. He goes into the bank, but in the bank, the people who are there are your children, your wife, your uncles, your grandparents. They're your family. And he puts them there deliberately. They're not bank customers. He went into the bank with his family and with members of your family. And what you do is good. Good. They're stuck in there for 2 years, and I have to feed them, provide for them, and bring in 1,500 tons of food a day, and I do it. Every time I try to go after the terrorist, I have to make calls and explain things, and this loses the element of surprise. Yes, sometimes they are affected because the terrorist chose to put their family in that situation. So, yes, if it's about freeing my brothers who are being held hostage and the terrorist put his family in that situation, with all due respect, I care more about my family than any complaint from the terrorist who put his family in that situation. I didn't start this war, I didn't ask for this war, I want this war to end quickly. But if the terrorist is doing everything possible to keep the war going, because he could end it, why doesn't he? Tell me, are we going to blame the person whose family member was kidnapped instead of blaming and pressuring the bank robber who is using human shields? Or are we going to blame the police who are trying to rescue the hostage in the bank? And in a situation that's practically out of a movie, something that had never happened to a country before. Who should we be blaming here? Why? The pressure has to be put on Israel, and should we never applaud or always blame Israel for everything? No, not now, because yes, never. If you really want this war to end, why don't you ask Hamas to surrender and return the hostages? And this nightmare ends, it's that simple.
Well, the nightmare would end if, for example, we went back to the border of 1960. I guess that's impossible for the Palestinian people because Netanyahu has declared that there can't be a Palestinian country.
I don't think there should be a Palestinian country either. By the way, but you know that in 2005, Israel does what you just said. Israel in 2005 gives to the Gazans. It withdraws to the 1967 borders. It did exactly what you say. According to your prediction, there should have been peace. What happened is that we didn't get peace, we got several wars, and the worst of all culminated on October 7th. So, the prediction of giving territory to Islamic radicals like Hamas is not a solution. To me, it's more of the problem. First, get rid of the radicals and then talk about concessions. But it can't be. And as you told me, you can't take the idea away. You told me at the beginning, you can't remove Hamas, uproot this radical terrorist resistance from the people. So what do? It's not terrorist? Never terrorist.
When you're convinced that the house is yours, you're not going to give up anything. That's what happens. You said before that they've rejected many agreements and they've been offered this, that, and the other. Do you know why? Because those people know it's their house, and when it's your house,
You don't? It never has been halal, it never has been. Tell me, when did Palestine exist as a country?
those people, that land, it's in their blood. Those people, their parents grew up there.
I disagree with you.
All those generations are from there. They're Arabs, Palestinians. You can't tell them that. For example, look, let me ask you a question. If you go now, for example, to Israel and you ask anyone in Tel Aviv, you ask them, where does your grandfather come from? They'll tell you Germany, another will say Russia, another Poland, another Ukraine. Why? Because they emigrated there. They're not from there. They're not from there. So the thing here is that the issue with the bank, the example I gave you,
Wait, let me address that last part. If you ask a Jew, where is your grandfather from? From Poland. But why? Why is he in Poland? Because before that, they were Jews expelled from Spain. And where were they before that? Well, they arrived when they were in exile from Babylon. And where were they before that? In Judea? All Jews will tell you, and you will ask them when your grandfather was in Poland, which direction did he pray? Toward Jerusalem? And what did their prayers say? That our eyes look to the return to Zion and all the Jewish aspiration. What blessing did your grandfather, who lived in Poland, say after eating? May Jerusalem be rebuilt, may next year be in Jerusalem. It's that all the exiles of the Jews, wherever they were in the world, always had the desire and aspiration to return to the land of Israel. In fact, that's what the prophets talk about, the returns from exile to the land, to the fact that there are Jews in Poland is a mistake. It's a consequence of an exile that always aspired to return. The case of the Gazans is the opposite. There are Gazans with the last name Al-Masri because they are Egyptians. There are all kinds. Yemenite, Teimani. There are all kinds. Yemenite, not all of them are from here. In fact, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration's definition to determine who is a Palestinian refugee is Arabs who lived in Israel between 1946 and 1948. Why? Because at the beginning of the 20th century, many Arabs came to this land because Israel was managing to perform an agricultural miracle, and many Arabs migrated due to the economic situation. Today's Arabs are called Palestinians, but not all are from here. There are some who do, like the Bedouins, who do have a history going back many centuries, but not all Arabs have their origins here. You ask, many come from other places, so it's not the first, it's the second. Aunque, that is to say, despite that, there has never been an autonomous Palestinian place, there has never been a Palestinian country, nor a Palestinian kingdom, nor a Palestinian emirate. They have never existed. Have they been allowed to? The people from Gaza, what they aspire to is not just to have Gaza. If they are from Gaza, we would assume they have been from Gaza for thousands of years. So why do they care about having jurisdiction over another tribe over there in Ramallah, which is on the other side, a distant place in Arab geographical terms? Why don't they have a country? The problem is we Jews have land, as you said. It doesn't matter that the Ottomans ruled over them, and the Ottomans are Turks. They're not even Arabs. They're not Palestinians. They're not locals. They're Turkish invaders. For you, there's no problem because it's between you, it's Muslim. That's the problem, that you can't conceive that we Jews have a country.
There's no problem, because for us, that part you know perfectly well that it's sacred. And he tells us that it's a very important mosque, that it's the first direction for Muslims. Before it was Mecca. And that place, it's not like we're just going to give it up like that. You know that even the conflict, I could ask you about it.
About this aspect, about Al-Aqsa,
It will start, let's say, even you can't form a country that you can call the nation of Israel without the coming of the Messiah. Are you contradicting the Bible? Is that why the Orthodox are against you? Because they understand the text literally, and they are against any state of Israel as long as the Messiah hasn't come. Do you agree? No.
I disagree for several reasons. For instance, Ezra and Nehemiah, Ezra alone is in Spanish. They were against this then. They made a country, the Maccabees. When we celebrate Hanukkah, did the Messiah come in the time of the Maccabees? No. And they had Maccabean independence and drove out the Seleucids. No, that's not how it is. What you're referring to is a Hasidic sect, and those are Ashkenazim, but they are true Jews. And the Hasidic, they have this Hasidic sect because there are Zionist Hasidic groups, and there are other Orthodox who are Zionists. But the Neturei Karta, who are a group of about 5,000 people on planet Earth, while we Jews are 13 million, so it's a sect that makes up about 1%. They interpret a page from the Talmud from a tractate that they take from a verse in the Song of Songs, which is an oath. Nothing to do with it. 97% of Jews worldwide are Zionists, including Israel's great sages and chief rabbinate. They are Zionists. So, who are the great composers of Natra nowadays then, aren't they like that? About Al-Aqsa, let me ask you. You say it was Mecca and its importance? Like Al-Aqsa, which in fact Al-Aqsa is in the Sunni Uslan. I assume you are Sunni. It's the third most important. I mean, it's not even the most important one. Tell me, why is Al-Aqsa important to you?
Well, it's the mosque where our Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, prayed. On the day of what's it called? The day of Al-Miraj, of Miraj, exactly, the day of Miraj. And it's also considered as well. It's a place where all the prophets have established the mosque, because the temple, let me remind you, is also a mosque. It's a place where people pray to God, the only one, because for us Muslims as well, David, Solomon, and all these prophets that you consider part of Judaism, we also see them as Muslims because they submitted to the will of God.
So let me ask you, based on that, you say the prophets were there, and you mentioned, for example, Solomon. Solomon built there what you call a mosque, the temple. That is to say, you are aware that there was a Jewish king there because David was Jewish and his son Solomon were Jews, Judahites, because they were from Judah. So, are you aware that the Jewish presence, even according to the Islamic narrative, was already there before Muhammad? And the reason you say that Muhammad went there on his night journey is because he had already been there. The Jewish prophets, that is, the Jewish presence, existed even before the mosque that was built. Afterwards, which is Al-Aqsa, that is, we Jews were there before Al-Aqsa, we were there before you.
See, but I don't agree that the Jews were there. What happens is that the Jews, as you understand it, when the Jew from Judah begins to emerge, they come from Judah, but then those same Jews, many have spread across the land and many have converted to Islam. We don't have that racist circle of thinking that we are the chosen nation and the chosen people. No.
But they do say that, Islam does say that, Islam does say that Muslims are chosen.
Islam, no, 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 no. Islam says that you are the best nation brought forth for humanity to preach and advise. We can, in Arabic, it's said, let's say manifested to society, to everyone. Isn't it that God, even for us in the Quran, says that if you don't do things right, God will replace you with others who do it better? O sea, para que tengas una idea de que esto.
That's a very good point you make. And if that's the case, if God decides to replace someone with someone who does it better, how do you explain then that Israel and the Jews are the ones who are here now? And despite all the attempts by Arab countries to exterminate us several times, in 48, in the late 50s, in 73 and 67, now with this war, 7 fronts at the same time, and we managed to defeat them all. Don't you think that this is sending a message to the UMA that maybe they should leave us alone because it has already decreed that we should be here?
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. You know why? Well, because if you've read the Surah Isra, where it says that God has written for the Jews that they will rule the world, they will rule the world. And I will bring them to a place, and when I bring them to a place, I will give them a chance. And if they don't fulfill it, let's say the prophecy will be transferred to another nation. Will it be, is that what happened to you, that the Jews broke the covenant? And that's why God took the prophecy away from them and gave it to the descendants of Ismail, who are the Arabs. And the last one?
And, okay, but if that's the case, how do you explain that God gave us back our land again and made us one of the strongest countries? And every time they try to wipe us out, that same nation you're saying received the prophecy fails. And each time we get more successful. The only explanation I see is that Allah, God, Hashem decided this, and that simply the Muslims are not understanding the situation and are fighting against a disaster, a sign from God. That is, you're saying that, according to the logic I'm hearing, they would be expelled for breaking the pact. But the thing is, He brought us back, returned us, as if something changed, as if the pact was renewed. I don't know, how would you explain it?
Although this opportunity you're talking about, the one you have right now, hasn't been fully granted to you. Because the temple hasn't been built and you're still at war, you haven't managed to complete it yet.
Let me ask you that then. You are telling me that if the Jews go to the Temple Mount and bring red cows, and you said they've never gone with a red cow, but you say that's a provocation? But now you're telling me that if the Jews did that, it's a sign that this is right. So do you understand that there's an internal contradiction in all of this?
No, no, no. What I'm telling you is that you're in that place right now when the Muslims are divided by these borders drawn by colonialism and we're not united. and you've taken advantage of a situation like this and you're there, doesn't mean that you're right or that you're the chosen people. Because you were saying that because we're here, that means this. And I told you that even though you're there, you haven't even achieved what you're bragging about. I mean, you haven't achieved it.
Actually, I understood it the other way around. You say that if Allah said, I'm not going back to this people because they broke the covenant, it turns out we came back and we have Jerusalem and the temple. We will have it, I assure you. And that's what happens. Will He laugh in our days soon then when that happens? Will the Muslims still be in shock? And that's why the point I'm making is that just like you, you're also not understanding the big message that history is giving you. The same thing happens with Hamas. It's a short circuit for the jihadist mentality. It's very hard to understand this. Like, how is it possible that the dhimmi people who we had as dhimmi and Allah despised them and turned them into rats and pigs and monkeys? How is it possible that now these people, now we are the dhimmis? How is it that now we have become the ones under their rule? It's a short circuit. That's the problem. The problem isn't that the Palestinians have a country. The problem, which they don't understand, is that we came back because it's a theological difficulty. The existence of Israel poses a challenge that Islam cannot solve because they didn't base their literature on the idea that the Jew was meant to be expelled forever. But since we Jews returned, the reading of the Torah is correct, of the Tanakh, because the prophets said we would return. So the Quran's thesis collapses as it was based on the Jew being exiled, but since the Jew is no longer in exile, the main challenge with Islam is its religious conflict, which is why wars occur. That's why it's not so much about territory, it's because it's a short circuit for Islam which it can't solve. That's the reflection I wanted to share with you, that it's beyond the land, it's about the religious factor. And you said it yourself. It doesn't matter if the Ottomans rule. What matters is that they're Turks because they're Muslims. So if you're already aware of that, then the idea is that you simply listen to the message that Allah is telling you. Over and over again, they try to exterminate us. Over and over again, they lose the wars and we win and have more successes. And the countries of Islam are constantly in worse wars and civil wars. They kill each other within the Ummah, creating total chaos in the Islamic nation. So listen to Allah.
If you have more or less an understanding of history, you'll realize that it's only a matter of time. The Christians were in those lands for 80, 90 years, and then that happened.
The Muslims have been saying that since it existed and since Israel was created. They said it's a matter of time. We're going to throw them into the sea. Come on, it's just a matter of time. Every year, it's only a matter of time.
How long have you been there in those lands? How long have you been there? How long have you been there?
80 years of Jewish presence in this land? No.
I'm talking about the Zionist state. The Zionist state.
The modern state of Israel, which is the rebirth from the ashes of Jewish independence 77 years ago. Let me ask you, how long has the Palestinian country existed?
The Palestinian country has existed for a long time because those people are called Palestinians and they already had a country. Do you know when?
When was it created?
No, there was the Ottoman Empire, but that area was called Palestinians. It's called a state. Just like there was also Algeria, a place that was called that, but not with the current borders.
Sorry, the Ottomans didn't call this place Palestine. They called it Sham. It had other names, but not Palestine.
Palestine?
Yes, they called it that.
There are historical accounts that say so.
No, on the contrary, in the Kushan records, Kushan is like territorial contracts. To humiliate the Jews, they called them Palestinians. The Ottomans used this term because it degraded us, as the Roman Empire had imposed the name Palestinian on the Jews as an insult. And that's how the Ottomans mocked the Jews, calling us Palestinians. Now you're telling me something that's not quite accurate, but the Ottoman Empire was not a Palestinian country. The Ottoman Empire was anti-colonialist, expansionist, Turkish. It had nothing to do with that. So, just for your information, there has never been a Palestinian state. There has never been a Palestinian emirate or anything like that. The first time was with the Oslo Accords. Israel allows them to have autonomy. It was invented. It's not that it was granted. Israel invented the Palestinian Authority so that they could have autonomy and stop committing terrorism against Israel. It's the first time in history that Palestinians, a people who emerged in the 1960s.
Listen, Jacob, I told you before that before the massive immigration of Jews, there were only 500,000 Jews in those lands, and the majority were Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims.
They were Arab Jews or they were Jews.
They were Muslims, Arabs who were called Palestinians, and there were only 500,000 Jews in that area living under the Ottoman Empire.
But I want to try to look at this double standard because you say, the Jews, how long has the state of Israel existed? 77 years? But the Jewish presence goes back 3,600 years. There has been a Jewish presence here for millennia, always. When I ask how long the Palestinian country has existed, the answer is it never has, yet you mention a Palestinian presence, so why can't I use the same argument? In that sense, there has been a Jewish presence from much earlier, so it doesn't fit.
Okay? Imagine Morocco, the French colonization. Imagine before the withdrawal of the French colonization. The Jews of Morocco say, we want to establish a country here and call it Israel. Taking into account that the majority of Morocco are Moroccans, Arabic-speaking Muslims. And with how many Jews were there? 1 million or less, much less. This small group draws some borders and calls it a Jewish state. Do you think this is fair in Morocco?
No, because Morocco is not ours. In Judea, yes, because Judea is ours. The land that is ours, and not only that. The places that Israel establishes, the kibbutzim and all these moshavim, moshavot, are places where there was no Arab presence. Israel literally buys land, drains swamps, makes deserts bloom. Israel creates in places where there was no Arab presence, and the Arabs were bothered that we Israelis had independence. That's the problem. The problem never, if you look at the records, an Arab was never expelled. Not until the 1948 war when the first Palestinian refugees who were Arabs appeared. They didn't even talk about Palestinian refugees at that time. They talked about Arab refugees. That's how it's stated in all the documents from that period. No one was expelled before 1948. Never before 1948. Yes, the Arabs started the war against Israel, and the outcome was a result of their actions. It's always the same. They start wars, lose, and then complain. But Jalel, I have to go. It's a bit late here, but let me tell you that I appreciate your patience. It's not very common to hear from people with such a different point of view. Can I say that? Right? I think we disagree on everything because at least we respect that there is a God and things like that, but I'm glad. The tone in which we spoke was quite pleasant. So that's just how it is.
And I say the same, even though we disagree on many things, because knowing who you are and who I am, but you always have to give in. Respect above all is more important, because I think respect is very important, because there won't be a dialogue, it wouldn't be a dialogue, it would just be nonsense because of that and nothing else. Thank you very much for having me another day. Yes, we can talk about history and all of this.
Perfect. Go ahead. Sending my regards.